Something that might surprise you is that while I focus a lot on this channel on the dangers of propaganda, I don't view propaganda as inherently bad. It's easy to have that view today when nearly all of propaganda produced is pure evil and aimed at destroying everything you love. But just like anything else, it's a tool that can be used properly or it can be abused. We often talk about how at least 80% of the population is made up of NPCs just blindly reacting to stimuli, never thinking for themselves. They're told how to think, and their software is updated, for lack of a better term, by the talking heads on TV and on the internet, and they go about their business regurgitating talking points and doing whatever they're told because, as I've covered in other videos, it's part of a survival strategy to get along with the group. Going against the grain is impossible for them because it literally endangers their ability to survive. They can't survive on their own, so they have to make sure they're in line with the group. This is never going to change, which is exactly why propaganda is necessary. That's right, it's necessary. You might be able to get the number of sentient people a little bit higher with education and cultural reforms, but the vast majority of people are always going to be NPCs. No matter what kind of society you have, the libertarian idea that we're all free-thinking individuals, kings of our own dominion, completely separate from the herd, applies only to a very small portion of the population, which is why, by the way, only a very small portion of the population are libertarians. And that portion is vastly outnumbered by the people who generally act as a group. They comply with the herd. So if you want to prevent these groups, these herds, from spinning out of control and going over the ledge and taking you with them, propaganda is one of the tools that has to be used. And the right has been modestly successful with propaganda in the last few years, not because they're talented manipulators. In fact, compared to leftist memes like big budget Hollywood films, it's amateur hour. But the reason right-wing memes, which are a form of propaganda, seem to be having such an impact on the culture is they're often telling the truth. They line up with reality. The left has been using their propaganda to push the NPCs as far away from reality as they possibly can for centuries. And it's been insanely successful. But even NPCs have eyes and ears. And even if it doesn't seem like it most of the time, they do live on the same planet and in the same reality as you do. The more personal experience that they have in the real world, the more they will obtain a sense of truth. Even if it's hidden under, layers and layers of leftist talking points, it's still there. And so the more they're going to respond, or at least maybe have the ability and the desire to respond to truth. The left knows this, which is exactly why they're trying as desperately as they can to prevent NPCs from having contact with the real world. They want them drugged up, watching their propaganda, living vicariously through the characters on their screens or the sports players on their screens, and interacting with other NPCs in virtual worlds that they have created for the NPCs. They want to keep the slaves in their cells and only opening the door if it's to retrieve a package of new virtual worlds left on their doorsteps by the Amazon Prime delivery man, who, by the way, because he's going out into the real world too, he must be replaced by robots so they can keep him in his cell, which will happen very soon, by the way. Now, that said, there are still a large number of NPCs that have plenty of exposure to real life. So propaganda that promotes truth is going to be more compatible. They're going to be more receptive to that than propaganda that promotes insanity. Positive, honest propaganda meant to guide them in the right direction is going to resonate with them because, as E. Michael Jones might say, it's logos. So with this in mind, I'd like to take a look at a film that was produced for propaganda purposes, but not with the intent to subvert or to destroy the culture and the nation. Propaganda that doesn't attempt to disguise itself as something it's not, with a distracting storyline or half-naked women or explosions. Propaganda the left would dismiss as antiquated and hateful. Propaganda like the 1961 film Boys Beware. Boys Beware was one of the many propaganda films produced by director and close friend of John Wayne's, Sidney Davis. John Wayne bankrolled the first film made by Davis called Dangerous Stranger, which was a propaganda film warning children, mostly young girls, of the dangers of being kidnapped by strangers. The film was shown in schools and by police departments all around the country and led to several other films such as VD, The Dropout, Girls Beware, and Keep Off the Grass. And before you laugh and snicker at these films, ask yourself if that attitude towards these films was programmed into you by bigger budget, more subversive and artful leftist propaganda produced in Hollywood. Are they really dangerous scare tactic films? Or were they useful tools designed to guide society away from real-life dangers? Were they logos? Boys Beware opens up with an honest, straightforward disclosure that it was produced with the help of the Inglewood Police Department and School District. How many Hollywood films tell you who's behind their messaging? The film then begins with Lieutenant Williams of the Inglewood Police Department narrating and telling the audience that he's on his way to go speak at a high school. We immediately see how much the trust in society has been eroded when he passes by young boys hitchhiking at the side of the road, something that has become way too dangerous to do in today's society. Dangers that were only just beginning to rear their ugly head in 1961 when this film was made. Lieutenant Williams begins to tell the tale of Jimmy Barnes, a boy who decided to hitch a ride home. He's picked up by a man who seems nice enough, but as we'll learn, this man is grooming him. The film accurately depicts the tactics of a predator. He's identified Jimmy as someone who's enough of a loner and in need of companionship that he's easily manipulated into spending time with the predator. As the predator, all the while lavishing Jimmy with gifts and praise, slowly introduces and escalates sexual behavior. First, it's jokes.
They stopped at a drive-in and the stranger treated him to a Coke. During their conversation, he told several off-color jokes, but Jimmy had heard others before and, well, it made him feel big to so easily win the confidence of an older person.
Then he shows Jimmy some pornography.
Then during lunch, Ralph showed him some pornographic pictures. Jimmy knew he shouldn't be interested, but, well, he was curious. What Jimmy didn't know was that Ralph was sick, a sickness that was not visible like smallpox, but no less dangerous and contagious, a sickness of the mind. You see, Ralph was a homosexual, a person who demands an intimate relationship with members of their own sex.
And there it is. That's the reason that you are programmed to hate these films. And I'm not talking about how in 1961, apparently, going out and shooting rifles was as normal as playing mini golf. I'm talking about how homosexuality was viewed as a mental illness. Also, the narrator calls the illness contagious. Here is where people watching this are going to start screaming that the film is promoting hate and ignorance, and you can't catch being gay. But that's not what the film's saying. Get ready for an extremely unpopular opinion that I share with the filmmakers that I developed using real world experience instead of some study, because unlike NPCs, I trust my eyes and ears over some faceless scientist with an agenda who puts a PDF on the internet. The film is saying that homosexuality is directly connected to abuse. Not meaning, by the way, that all homosexuals are abusers, okay? Meaning that often childhood abuse leads to adult homosexuality. Now, as someone that's worked in an industry with a high concentration of gay people, it's been my experience, my real life, real world experience, that this is unbelievably true. Okay, with only one exception, one. Every single gay person I have ever known, professionally or otherwise, was not only abused, but they told me about it. Okay? Even the ones I didn't even really know very well, it still managed to somehow come up in conversation, which tells me this was a major event in their lives. I mean, there was a guy I worked with for like an afternoon, and he told me that he was molested by his uncle in like the 4 hours that I interacted with this guy. Every single one of them, except one, who, by the way, I don't even really think counts as an exception, because he told me that when he was a toddler, his mother used to dress him up as a little girl and tell all her friends that he was her daughter. So I don't really think that qualifies as the exception, but he never told me that he was abused, explicitly. So I'll give it the one exception. Now, I'm sure the comment section is going to be filled with people telling me about, study X and study Y says that this or that, or that, they're gay and they weren't molested or whatever. It doesn't fucking matter. Okay. Without exception. And this includes Milo now that I'm thinking about it. Without exception, every single gay person I have ever worked with or interacted with, and we're talking probably about a sample size of at least 100. Okay? Every single one of them were either molested or lied and told me that they were molested. And again, that doesn't mean that all gay people are abusers, by the way. That means most gay people, or all that I'm aware of that I've interacted with personally, were victims. That's completely different. And the fact that my personal experience lines up exactly with what was considered common knowledge before our culture was completely hijacked by the people that clearly have an agenda and are promoting shit like this, and is now going after our children, tells me really all I need to know. So fuck your studies. Okay? So back to the film. Billy, having been groomed by this older man, gets molested. By the way, this plays out exactly like the scenarios in the documentary An Open Secret. Older gay men grooming young boys with gifts and promises of fame and then sexually assaulting them. And surprise, surprise, by the way, many of those boys end up turning out to be gay as adults. So do you think that was a coincidence that these rich, older gay men just happened to pick, like just magically their gaydar was that good? They picked these young boys that were born gay and then abused them? You think that's what happened? You don't think that the abuse itself had an effect? Oh, right, because you probably have a study, right? This film wasn't hate speech or some kind of disinformation campaign aimed at demonizing gays. And again, it wasn't saying that all gays were abusers. This film is considered hateful simply by warning boys that some abusers are gay. And it's not just girls who are victims. This is an extremely important message, and this propaganda is severely lacking today. So Billy eventually tells his parents, and they go to the police department, and the man is arrested. But I also found interesting that Billy is given probation. And that's likely because sodomy was illegal in 1961, and they still enforced these laws that were meant to prevent society from degenerating into this. But now we have freedom, right, guys? And freedom's great. The next scenario in the film warns about another danger boys face, but not from being groomed. In this scenario, the sexual predator identifies the loner, and it begins kind of in the same way it did with the one that was doing the grooming, but instead of taking the boy home, he's never seen again after getting in the man's car. The trust in the nation was just beginning to crumble in 1961, so while it might seem strange to see all these boys just getting into cars with strange men, that was kind of the country America was in 1961. People trusted each other. They were all part of the same community, the same family, which of course will never be true again. We see this same aspect of a culture long gone reiterated when, in the next scenario, another boy is easily coaxed into the car of a stranger. And rather than the narrator, by the way, focusing on avoiding this situation altogether, not going into the car with the stranger, he focuses on how important it is for his friend to get the license plate number of the car, which he does, and the cops save him as a result. In the last scenario, the film warns boys of strange men hanging out in public restrooms and to stay together in groups. All good advice, by the way, nothing hateful about it. In fact, I'd like you to listen to the closing statement of this film. And I know this is going to trigger a lot of people, but I want you to tell me, where's the hate?
So no matter where you meet a stranger, be careful if they are too friendly, if they try to win your confidence too quickly, and if they become overly personal. One never knows when the homosexual is about. He may appear normal, and it may be too late when you discover he is mentally ill. So keep with your group, and don't go off alone with strangers unless you have the permission of your parent or teacher.
This film in no way was about demonizing homosexuals. It was about protecting boys from predators. And if you listen to the statement and hear hate, in Lieutenant Williams' words, you're hearing what leftist propaganda has told you to hear. For BlackPilled, I'm Devin Stack. If you like my videos, make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you share. If you want to help support my videos, you can grab a copy of my book, Day of the Rope. Link is in the description. Hopefully, audiobook coming out soon. You can also send crypto to one of the addresses below or become a patron at patreon.com/BlackPilled.